Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Let- Good morning, good afternoon. As folks are joining, comments are open. The chat is open, I should say. If you want to jump in, let us know where you're from, where you're dialing in from today. Love to see that. All right, here we go. Got it. Tim, we've got another Wisconsinite right now. Welcome, guys. Okay, another from Tennessee. Amazing.
Colombia.
Colombia? Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
Two Wisconsins. I'm impressed. This is like the theme of the chat so far.
We are the mecca of AI, is what I'm telling you.
I mean, you would not have guessed it, but
No.
maybe that's true. It could be true. All right. Got Europe. Great. Welcome, welcome. We'll keep letting folks in for a few minutes before I kick off the content. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning or this afternoon.
I love that someone from England's getting into the Wisconsin spirit here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Sorry, I had to scroll down. I was like looking for the locations. Guys, as we're joining, I'll just say this. I'll say this again in a minute, but we want this to be as interactive as possible. So I appreciate you guys adding to the chat and letting us know where you're calling in from. As we go through the content, the discussion today, um, feel free to drop a question in. If we don't pick it up in line, I'll try to make sure we have a couple minutes at the end to circle back to those questions. And if you have it for a specific panelist, Ariel or Tim, that's fine. If you just generally want to, dive into something a little bit more specific, once again, I'll try to move us along so we have some time at the end here. We'll give it one more minute as folks are jumping on, and then I'll go and introduce our guest today. And maybe we'll let them, tell you guys where they're sitting right now. But all right, we're 3 minutes in. We can kick it off. Thanks everyone again. Reiterate, appreciate you spending time with us. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, welcome. Happy to have you guys there. If you're catching this in the future, the recording, appreciate you guys spending time. Hopefully learning something and taking something away. These, kind of this series of webinars at Ambition we've been doing recently, all focused on what's happening and what's happening within the revenue organization from the revenue leader's perspective. Today's topic is going to be really centered around utilizing AI, this massive spectrum of new capabilities we have in the enterprise to both highlight areas where our reps or our sellers or our customer-facing people need to be better, but also how to deploy training and deploy tactics to make them better and to make them more effective. And so I'm really honored and lucky to have two amazing guests here, Ariel Hitron from Second Nature, Tim Reister from Corporate Visions. I'm going to let each of you guys introduce yourselves and give us a little background. I'll start with you, Ariel. First of all, where are you calling in from? And then hit us with the a little bit of the background.
Awesome. So it's great to be here. My name is Ariel Hitron. I'm, as I said, co-founder of Second Nature. I'm calling from Tel Aviv, Israel today. It's nice and sunny here. And I'm really excited for this conversation. Been knowing both Tim and Brian for a while now, and excited that this is kind of shaping into place. What we do, and I do specifically, I come from a background of product and turned into sales leadership and started the Second Nature a few years ago before AI was as cool as it is today. And with the vision of using AI to help train, coach, certify sales reps and help them get better at what they do. And so it's really exciting to see how the industry is now getting there in terms of the capabilities, and looking forward to the discussion.
Awesome. Thank you. Tim.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Yeah, Tim Reister with Corporate Visions, Chief Strategy Officer. I'm calling in from a very economical DoubleTree Hilton in Chicago, where I'm part of a workshop these 2 days, but happy to jump out and be a part of this kind of conversation. Corporate Visions works with about 250 companies every year to basically help load the lips of salespeople. I always say that the customer conversation, after all we do to get there, is the last bastion of competitive differentiation, and making that moment better. I like to say we help sellers be their best in the moments that matter most, and that's when they're in front of a customer with their lips moving. So what AI can do for training, coaching, equipping, and enabling sellers in real time in those real moments is pretty exciting, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Tim. And I'm Brian Troutschild. I'm the COO and co-founder at Ambition. Ambition is a sales performance and coaching AI platform. We help organizations maximize the productivity, maximize the performance of their frontline sellers, as well as their managers' capability to impact those sellers. So I will try to speak as little as possible today and let Tim and Ariel take the majority of the conversation. But I'm going to set the table a little bit, and then we're going to kind of highlight some pillars to speak about or to frame how AI can be involved in this process. And we've done a lot of research over the last couple months. I think everyone's in research mode right now when it comes to AI. They're trying to figure out what capabilities are emerging, what's already available, where they need to be catching up from their organization. And this is not just in sales and revenue; it's in every part of the organization, I think. But our friends at Forrester had some great research and some comments on, that sales managers are your secret agents of change. And I think this is maybe how it's always been. I remember first getting into sales, and some of you are probably a lot younger and smarter than me. Some are probably more experienced. But when I got in, it was like you're in a big room with everyone around you, and you're sitting on the same row as your sales manager. And like one of the things they were doing all the time was like hearing little things you were saying and trying to like adjust your story, adjust your way of asking questions. And they're really the way to drive this performance through the organization. And Forrester highlights that there's this critical element that's missed from them, which is that they often don't get deep intelligence, and they have in here cool gadgets. We've replaced that with AI that help the manager and ultimately the rep be successful. And we've got to start to invest in the manager, their capabilities, their visibility. And so we doubled down on this and did some asking questions over the last month in a revenue leader survey, excuse me. And we asked, when we're looking at the type of roles and where AI is having the most support or the most kind of investment at this point, the majority, by and large, over 2/3, is going to the seller. The seller is having AI capabilities to maybe do outreach, maybe prospect. Executives are the next at 20%, which means how they are visualizing, getting visibility into their trends, analysis on the numbers, and managers just over 10% of that kind of area of support, area of investment. I think this very much supports exactly what Forrester had highlighted. And it's interesting to me because it's not because there's a lack of budget. I think it's really not seeing that there's a huge lever to be pulled there or leverage to be gained by investing in that manager visibility, that manager capability. And like I said, people are spending money on this. People are dedicating time and resources and implementation cycles to it. 71% of the companies that we spoke to in the survey are integrating AI into their sales strategy. So it is happening at majority level right now. And interestingly, this is really quickly, we saw this kind of wave as, oh, what's happening? What's capable? Oh, we need to take a look at, how do we need to limit this from a policy standpoint or a privacy standpoint? And the reality is that people are not slowing down. What we see, I mean, maybe a little bit of hesitancy, maybe making sure they're, having some guardrails in place, but they're not being limited by internal policies and privacy on utilizing AI. So last thing, and then I'll get to Ariel and Tim. And if you guys have any disagreement in here, happy to get some counter takes. But when we look at the state of AI in sales right now, the majority is about improving the performance of our people, which I think is amazing. I think the concern, and I'll skip to the bottom one first, is that a lot of people are thinking and framing this in news articles, and I'm thinking about CNBC or headlines about reduction in headcount or reducing the amount of people they need on a given team. And interestingly, if you look at this, 92% of people are saying we're either trying to really impact human capability, the performance of our people, or we're trying to save them time and save them effort and streamline their workflows, which I think is really a positive. I think that's going to make our whether it's our sellers, our managers, our executives, our admins, much more effective, much more efficient. And so, I think we'll touch on those in each of our next 4 pillars. But this to me is a sign of positivity and a sign where we can maybe take some of the concerns and guardrails off and really invest in how do we make our people more effective, less encumbered by tasks or management. So, Tim, Ariel, any comments here, or can I move forward?
Yeah, I'll just say I was running a panel discussion at an industry dinner event here recently in the Bay Area, and one hot techie company's head of go-to-market strategy and ops was talking about the tech stack that they were running, and most of it beginning to be powered more and more by AI, and wanting to basically do number 2, offload rep and manager daily tasks. That was like his main remit. And I was like, okay, so how much time? Like, what's your goal? Or do you have a number? And he's like, we got to give them back 20% of their time. And so I think there's 2 different moves when it comes to the tech and the AI. And there are some people who is literally their job is let's give people back time. And then everybody's like, now what are they going to do with that time? And I think that's the other one. That's that 58%. In this guy's case, 80% or 80 plus. Now I got 20% more time. I gotta do this other stuff, and will I be good at it? And what does that look like? And I think that's what we're going to talk about today is really the how do we improve human performance part? Because once we've cleared the decks on productivity, now somebody's got to do their job better. The human interaction still matters, and so how can we impact that?
Yeah, I would agree. I just think that AI would not replace people. I don't see that with our customers and the organizations that we work with. That's not the goal. So I think that's very consistent with the survey here. I think that it replaces some tasks. And I think that the definition of the role then over time would mold and become different, right? So if you had the superpower of writing amazing emails and now AI can write amazing emails, then you would have to grow new superpowers in order to stay ahead. And I think everyone is leveling up right now. Everyone is leveling up in terms of their ability to write, their ability to deliver, the way that they're handling the conversations and so on and so forth. So that's definitely what we're seeing. I don't feel that kind of AI is out there for our jobs just yet.
Yeah, I agree. And that's certainly consistent with the survey. I wanted to touch on 2 points you guys made I think this will be reinforced throughout the conversation. But we talk a lot about the AI plus HI and ambition, that human intelligence, that human component, or having we talk about a more enhanced human in the loop. Can you give them more information? Can you give them better best practices, suggestions? And then that person's going to go, drive that conversation with the customer or an internal employee. And are you preparing them in the best possible way? And so I think that's exactly right. And Tim, I appreciate you bringing that up. And yeah, Ariel, to your point, I think that everyone is leveling up, and it's going to require even better skills and storytelling, and like the seller is going to have to be better at their role, because the noise, to your point, like the automation, the noise, the things around it is going to be also, there's going to be more volume of that. And so I think that is areas where certainly CVI, certainly second nature, I think managers have a huge role to play in that, and how to get the best connection and ultimately have the best possible relationship with that customer or that prospect. So that's great. I'm gonna keep us moving, and I'm gonna start handing these over a couple questions that we have pre-built here through the discussion. Once again, folks, when we get onto a topic or we start unpacking a story or a question, please please add to the chat if you have anything you want to dive deeper on. My goal here throughout this is that this is a relatively casual but tactical conversation. So if you're here, you're watching or you're watching on LinkedIn, you can take something away and either say, I want to learn more about that, or that's something I want to go try to implement, some way in our organization today, or we need help with. So we've identified kind of four pillars of this, AI strategy as it terms with revenue enablement, revenue coaching, and we're going to talk about alignment and fluency, performance analysis, optimizing the skill training, and personalizing coaching. And each of these will have kind of a section that we'll dig into. The first is going to be that alignment and fluency. And so, quick definition, and I'll kick a question over. We believe that revenue orgs need the ability to deliver consistent, compelling message to the market and have the highest degree of confidence that their team is all running in the same direction, running on the same story, understands the value proposition. And so, first question, and I'm going to kick it to Tim first. But how are revenue orgs driving that alignment and fluency on that story, and how do they make sure their customers care about the story right now?
Yes, I'm going to agree that when you net it all out, what's left for the seller to do, if we kind of take their administrative tasks and things off the table, the main thing that's left for the seller to do, I call value articulation. And so the difference between high and low performers isn't the products they sell, because everybody on their team sells the same products. It's whether or not they can articulate value. Now, Gartner doesn't call it value articulation. They always need a different word. They call it value affirmation. Like, the main job of sellers moving into the future is value affirmation, meaning helping to affirm their value and help the customer to affirm the value so they can make a decision. Well, to me, value is something that's communicated. It's something that's conversated, if I can say that. And so how do your conversations, presentations, and messaging related to that articulate value or affirm value? And so this is the central point of what's left for the human interaction. So having a consistent message that is a high quality message and also is a distinct message, because this is the thing, your customers are awash in information, so you got to cut through the noise. So that's part of the problem as well. So what I would say is that revenue orgs need to make sure, number one, that they have a distinct and different message that breaks through the noise. And then they have to make sure that everyone can deliver that in a consistent, high quality way as intended, right? Don't void the warranty on the message, like deliver it the way it needs to be delivered, because it's going to improve the odds of winning, because it's been determined this is the best way to articulate value. One last thought on that is most companies then start with, well, I'm not even sure where to start to figure that out. And one of the things we've been doing more and more as we help companies build their message is including win-loss and buyer feedback. Because it turns out people who recently made a decision for you or against you have some opinions they're willing to share about what they experienced in terms of your product, their perceptions of your product, and their perceptions of the experience they had with your sellers. And if you're just doing this in a vacuum or an echo chamber, building your messages without buyer feedback that came from real decisions made by real people recently for or against you, you're missing the mark. And that buyer feedback can all be done with AI and incorporated back into your stories as well. So that's my riff on the value of consistent message. It's about value articulation or affirmation, and most of that happens through the words you say and how you say it.
Yeah, I love kind of how you frame that, and also bringing that win story or maybe lost story and feedback into the process. My history is that organizations or consultants of the org can come in, they can help craft this amazing story, they can build all this collateral, and it comes back to the human in the loop. Do the sellers, do they go tell that with fluency? Do they do a great job like understanding and being able to communicate it, as you said? Ari, I'll kick it to you for question two, and Tim certainly jump in as well. But how can, or maybe what is, kind of the newest state of, how can organizations take that story, take that, skill set, and get reps to adopt, and get reps to, really embody that conversation they're having with the customer.
Absolutely. And I think you can take something like corporate visions, like great frameworks, and then with them craft a message that is kind of built into that framework and personalized for the company, which they do great. But then you have to make sure that all of your reps can actually deliver that, and consistently. So the rollout of that is hard. First of all, it's very hard to know, even with all of the conversational intelligence tools out there, how well they're actually delivering it. Are they delivering it as intended? The fact that you have a few keywords or trackers, does that really mean that they're delivering it as I intend them to do, and so on and so forth? So there's a gap there, first and foremost, that I think with newer technologies now, we can start squeezing that gap and really going deeper than just trackers and keywords into, do they actually deliver it in the way that I intended them to deliver it? Then you can get like a read of that. So I'd say that's number one. Number two is, if you want to create consistency, it's about behavior change. And we're not machines, we're humans, and changing behavior is hard. It's so hard to change the reps' behaviors. And so many times we get this great insight on how we should deliver the story. We kind of hear about it, we read about it, we go on a Zoom call and kind of get trained on it. Then we go back and we switch back to our own behavior, because that's the way we always done it. And how do you drive a behavior change that would make it your second nature, your habit, to do it in a new way? I think that requires a lot of repetition and practice in order to change the way that you're doing it. So I'd say that's the second part. And I think that, for example, we see that with a new product rollout. So one of our customers kind of wanted to launch a product to a large audience, thousands of sellers. And how do you train them to talk about the product that's completely new, that they're not used to selling, new buyer persona, and really accelerate the time that they're doing that? That's really hard. And I think that using AI capabilities allows you to do that. So taking a message that's well crafted and then rolling it out efficiently, tracking how many people are doing that, and then helping them practice with AI until they get it exactly right. I think that's one big plus. I'll just add one more thing about it that kind of maybe goes against a little bit what we said before. The consistency and alignment is one thing, but on the flip side, every customer is unique, every prospect is a jewel, everybody needs their own talk track, right? Nobody wants to hear like someone reading off a script of exactly how the message is. So how can you help your reps or your team practice the most important skill of a seller, which is listening and adapting the message on the fly to what the buyer actually needs, right? So yes, you have to have consistent message, but you have to make adaptations, I'm sure Tim would agree, to the needs of that specific prospect. So how do you practice that skill, which is much harder? And we'll talk about skills in a bit, but I think that's also something to think about as we're thinking about alignment and fluency.
Yeah, well, Tim, I think, when you said conversate earlier, it's a two-way street, right? Like it's not just a rep who's just spitting down, one way information. You got to be taking it in and adapting. I wanted to jump on the last question there about accountability and awareness, because I think RL, you highlighted, we're talking about humans here. We're talking about people who are maybe comfortable or have had success in one way of doing things, or one process or one set of storylines. And then when that's adjusting, the market's changing or the expectations are changing. We see a lot of folks who are trying to create accountability to a new process or a new way of selling, or a new product mix, and then awareness both from the manager but also the organization of like, are people adopting it, are people doing it? And the two things I would say we've seen in customers, very similar profile, rolling out a new methodology or a new selling story throughout revenue org, North America wide, tons of people who are remote. The first thing is you have to make sure they have confidence it's going to work. Does the does the rep believe that? Does the manager believe that? Does the director of sales? Does the VP of sales? Does everyone believe this is going to work? And then reiterating that communication all the way back into the field. And then are you having, what we believe is recurring conversations about that? If it's Jan 1 and you launch a new process, a new story, a new conversation format, and you say, we're going to win a ton of deals this year. We feel great about it. This is sick. And then you don't talk about it until March 31st at the end of the quarter or whatever. Like, I promise no one's doing it at my March 31st. Like, they're all doing back whatever they said, whatever they were comfortable with before. So I think it's the confidence, the practice, the ability to continue to cycle and make sure, we're actually talking about those things, and that the people who, matter to the rep are doing that as well. We'll keep moving here. That was great. Another pillar, kind of in this lane, is performance analysis. And I find this as being incredibly fascinating. We talk about, how much AI can impact this. Tim made a great point earlier, but AI can now analyze the performance metrics, the trends, the behavior patterns, the patterns within opportunities, win and loss, at a level that, frankly, an individual person, your typical person, is not going to be capable of doing. And they can do it at scale. They can do it across a wide amount of data. And so I think this one is fairly obvious and is fairly, going to be here and going to be part of, I think, a lot of people's process going forward. This time I'll flip it here and go back to Tim. How does the ability to do, AI driven performance analysis, how does that augment you used this phrase earlier, the managers, or the human intelligence of that manager?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I think about. Is that we've done some research with Florida State University Sales Institute and took a look at what will cause sellers to be willing to change a behavior. Will it be feedback from their peers, feedback from their manager, or feedback from their buyers? And getting feedback from buyers is 30% higher in terms of sellers' willingness to respond and to seek behavior change. And I think that's augmenting managers' human intelligence. I think what we're seeing when we work with companies, we have a company right now that sort of triangulates their enablement. They've created sort of a more of a situational enablement philosophy, and they go and get buyer feedback to see where maybe the in the wins and losses your customer's struggling. And in this case, what they found is in their losses, the area they were struggling the most was their ability to be creative in their negotiations and pricing. And they looked and they found they had nothing in their skills repertoire for that. And they're like, well, maybe that's part of the problem. But they also then interviewed the managers and the sellers and were able to triangulate around, and now do this consistently, what skills are gaps and absent. And it's not just the seller self-reporting, it's not just the manager's observational reporting, but it's also the buyer's feedback factored into prioritizing then the coaching efforts, both at a team level, maybe at a company level, at a team level. And if you do this at scale, you can get that down to the rep level to understand where the gaps are, deal by deal, rep by rep. And I think that's what the manager lacks, is when you think about reviewing all those call recordings and you're like, how do I find the thing to coach? And how does one call give me a picture of this seller's overall performance when it comes to a decision? Like, that's the hardest part for a manager. Is I don't want to coach like peanut butter, just slather it all over the organization. I don't want to guess. I want to know. Like, I want to place my bet in my coaching. Like, if I was a personal trainer at a gym, I would not want to waste time on exercises that aren't fixing the problems that I have, right? And so augmenting the manager by giving them insights from the seller's perspective and the buyer's perspective, and then bringing their own into that, will help identify and then tailor the coaching. And that's what I think is the huge, and this can all be done at scale very quickly with AI. And I think that's going to make the breakthrough, is having that kind of insight to augment the manager's observations and then allow them to pinpoint the interventions.
Yeah, Ariel, I know you guys have the capability of really providing some of those insights and providing some of that feedback to the rep and the manager. Care to add how we can
Yeah,
augment
absolutely.
that?
I think that we're living in an era where there's so much data, right? So there's so much data, and if I'm a manager and I can look at Salesforce reports, even without going into AI just yet, just like I get like everything in the data, right? And I can tell my rep, look, like your talk ratio is too high. The time it takes you to move from discovery to demo is too high. You're sending one email instead of three, and like I can give him a full list of things. But for a person, again, for me, like this, for a machine, they can absorb all of the data, crunch it, and then do something. A person needs to have it packaged in a way that they can actually change their behavior and do something about it, and not just feel overwhelmed with an enormous amount of data that's thrown at it. So I think that a lot of what I'm seeing right now with AI is kind of bridging between this data world where there's like, if there's a powerful AI tool that runs an analysis on the CRM, every seller would kind of get a panic attack, right? There's so many things that you can do better. But I think that if you can really time it and then help me understand what I can actually do about it, my talk ratio that is not good, and help me practice that a little bit so I can actually change the behavior and do it in chunks, right? So let's work on this first, and let's build the confidence and the trust that this AI thing giving me advice has some insight that's actually worthwhile, because otherwise I'll just put it aside, just keep on doing what I've done. And I think that, to your point, Brian, before, building that trust is being all about being incremental and saying, okay, here's the one thing out of everything that we've seen that is relevant for you right now. We think we should try that. And let's practice it a little bit and let's see how that works. And then moving on to the next thing. So just be aware of too much information.
Well, I think that's a great point. Put myself in the spotlight for a minute. I'm terrible at golf, and if I went and saw a golf coach for 30 minutes, and the first thing that they say are like, "Your swing is terrible. You have to change X, Y, Z, and do this." I'm like, I'm just quitting. Like this, I'm not done with golf. Like I can't do it. But if they say, hey, like let's just work on whatever, your grip, one thing that I can slightly adjust, to your point about being incremental and being rather specific with the suggestion, I think that's amazing. And I think we see this today with our customers. We see it with what people are trying to explore. Being able to give both the manager and the rep that feedback simultaneously. So here are areas where performance or trends or the analysis shows that you're deficient or there's areas of improvement. Now the manager and the rep, the manager doesn't have to go be the analyst, right? To your point about like there's infinite amount of data and signals in Salesforce, but what manager has the time, realistically to go analyze it, pull through it, sort it, figure out what is causation, what's just correlate, what's correlated there. The reality is most of them don't. They're dealing with 6, 8, 10, 12 direct reports who want them on a call with this buyer, who want to review this deal, who want to do X, Y, and Z. And if the system can tell both parties, the manager and the rep, this is an area where Brian is could use some work. And now we kind of agree that that's the baseline. Now we can go spend 30 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever and do some work and say, how do I get better at my grip or my whatever, And I think that's a really exciting place that we're going, and that people can use this to really impact the performance and the effectiveness of their team.
Just to pick up on that before we move forward, like the golf example, like in reality, what would happen is they would give you the golf and the ball, and you will practice it, and you'll get the feedback loop from doing it and feeling that you got better in this one thing. And the feedback loop will be extremely fast because you'll do it like 10 times during that session, and you feel that you got better and you got something back out of it, and you start building trust in this relationship, right? So that's a scenario that we're trying to mimic. So not only do you synthesize what is the one thing or one or two things that I have to do right now, you also give me an ability to practice that and get the feedback that's actually contributing.
Right. Right. That's great. I mean, I think that point also uh, really eloquently feeds into, training and skill improvement. Um, because if I showed up at Tim's office and went into a sales pitch, he'd probably be like, "You're the worst salesperson ever. You need to change everything. Story sucks. The messaging sucks." But if he gave me one or two things, I'd probably start doing it. Let's talk about, how AI is going to impact, empower, and I think really radically change skill training. Um, and once again, think about this kind of heuristic of these pillars, you know, based on what we see in the analysis, based on what we see in the actual rep performance, AI can provide stimulation, can provide role playing that a sales rep can test in a low pressure situation their skills and improve their skills and practice. And so I'm gonna once again, I'll keep the same order going, and I expect both you guys will have a lot to comment here. But what is the future of training and ultimately enablement? Like, how do we make these people better? Look like for sellers with AI as part of the discussion, Tim.
Yeah, I think that what you're seeing is that we're going to be able to generate the signal, right? There's going to be a trigger, and we can even hone in on and stack rank maybe the skill or the deficiency, and point it out and say you should really work on this. And if we don't close the loop, we just set off the risk and alarm bells in the seller's mind, and again gave them something manageable, one thing. If we can't close the loop and say, now here's something that will make this better, like there's some research, there's some testings, there's some proof that if you do this different and do it in this way, you'll get better at that skill, and that will be predictive of success. So I always say, if we don't have a remedy for the risk that we identified and just keep telling people where they're sucking, then you're just a
Yeah,
jerk, so you got to close the loop. And I think you're right. The disruption for training, given that we train 100,000 sellers every year, I'm sitting right in the square in the middle of this discussion of like just in case training versus just in time training, we call it. Just in cases you went into a classroom event and you hope they remembered it, and we taught them everything we could just in case they might need it. But the problem is long forgotten. So I think everybody knows that. But the reality was there was just no efficient way to, in the moment, I like to say, not just in time, but just enough just in time, get somebody something that'll be helpful. As humans, we are primarily deficit learners. We learn only and learn best when we find ourselves in a deficit. So the AI surfaces that deficit. Now I'm ready to learn something, but I want to learn just enough, just in time about that thing. And that's what the future of training enablement is going to look like. Just enough, just in time. And then that person can go to work on that thing. And to Ariel's point, now I know what to work on, and I believe it's going to work because there's some research that supports that. And now I get to practice it at a level of demonstrated proficiency, all happening on that one thing, all in the flow of work. And that's where all of this is taking place now. So, and we're seeing tremendous results. We had a company that worked specifically and said, we are going to fix our no decision problem, and went with a very pinpoint enablement program around no decisions. Just a few nudges of some certain skills that they needed to fix, like multi-threading needed to be a thing, insights need to be a thing, value justification need to be a thing. Those three skills, let's just work on these for this quarter and do some exercises, do some demonstrated interactions and role plays, and lo and behold, they saw a 6% decrease in no decisions and improvement in their win rate. With a focused, concentrated effort, they move the needle. And you do the math on a 6% decrease in no decision and increase in your win rates. And the only thing that changed was this very precise, just-in-time enablement program. And you can start to see that the peanut butter methodology of training is dead. And that the reality is the precision in the moment training and coaching is where this all has to go. Also for ROI justification, like you go in knowing the thing you're trying to fix you put the fix in place, and then you measure it and say, it looks like we fixed it. Everybody's been looking for that as a holy grail. It's now all possible. And that's what's exciting. I think this is terribly exciting. It could feel like a disruption, but it's like, no, this is what's going to keep us from extinction.
That's a great quote. Ariel, I'm sure you have a strong opinion. I feel like, Tim's sitting in the middle of these 100,000 rep per year, how to make them a lot better and more effective. You're building technology that also enables that. What do you think the future looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a combination of things that we've discussed, right? So, I'm going to pick up on what Tim just said with the no decision, and part of it is the skill of value justification. And in order to change behavior of a large team, to do that properly, you have to understand what it means, what are the methods, what are the frameworks, so that you're not just reading from a script, because that never works. And you have to practice it in a very specific scenario. You cannot do value justification for something generic. It has to be specific to the value that you're selling if you want to practice it, right? So I'm saying that pulls the things together. And to me, the skills and the product knowledge, when you're in a conversation, they're just mixed together and inseparable. In learning, you have to separate them a little bit so that you have the mental mode and the mental picture of what the skill is, so that you can frame it in your own words. So I think that's point number one from the discussion. I think the other one is to comment on what Mark put in the chat here. And I think that there's a lot of tools out there right now. Like you can use chat GPTs and build your custom GPTs. And I think that's awesome. I think that what I found where organizations that work with us find most effective is exactly what Tim said about just-in-time and workflow. It has to be fit into the workflow, that for learning, for selling, for being in the environment of the seller, and relevant for what's actually happening in the moment. So I think that's a lot of the value of platforms that are specialized versus generic, that they can tie it all together with the data, with the workflow, with everything. And I'm sure that the ambition feels that as well on your end.
Absolutely. I didn't mean to move our slide there. I was trying to get, I could not agree more. I mean, part of the workflow is, how it all fits together, whether it's just in time or just enough or very specific, but also, there are these, we used to call them business processes. Now, all of us software people call them workflows, but it's like, how does the organization operate? How do they go do the work? How do these things happen in the real world between a couple people ultimately trying to reach end of a quarter or end of a year? And I think when deployed effectively, it's enhancing that workflow. It's making that easier. It's making those things, getting the insights to the person who can then utilize it to improve their performance at the right time. I'm curious because we talked about human intelligence and the improving the performance of the individual with AI. What skills do you think are now going to be critical? Like or maybe it doesn't change at all. Then maybe that's a countertake, but what do you think will be critical for this new, AI augmented era of sales?
So do you mean rep skills specifically and how they engage in those human interactions, or skills in terms of how to train, develop, coach, and enable? I think there's really two tracks of skills, like what's left for the human interaction part that the rep must really be great at, that a customer is going to care about. That's one question. And then I think the other is what's the skill of the manager and rep in that relationship that drives performance moving forward. So I'm going to push that back to you, BT.
Yeah, hey, I'd go with the rep skills.
Okay.
I think the manager part is I do think their skills have to change, but I think I really think back to your point, like the human in the loop has to be phenomenal and really be better at a handful of different things.
Right. Well, RL's going to know I have a strong opinion about this, and I'll do a shameless plug for our work with Second Nature right after it. But here's what we sit now on top of the largest B2B win-loss database that anybody has. So we have 100,000 deals from the recent years from up to 90 different companies. And we can look at this information and start to realize trends in terms of customer feedback telling us what they liked and didn't like about their experience in the sales process. And not just about the product. Win-loss has too often been, subjugated, like moved out, like, oh, it's a products thing. We want comp intel and we want product roadmap knowledge. The reality is the most benefit to win-loss is what can we change now and change in the sales experience. So I'm going to throw out a number for everybody. What we have found is that 53% of your losses, 53% of your losses are the result of something that happened in the sales experience. The buyer tells us that the losing vendor could have won if it wasn't for something that happened in the sales experience. That means that when your reps tell you the reason they lost is outside of their control, they're lying at least 53% of the time. And now we've been able to hone in, okay, so what skills or experiences are predictive of wins and losses? And we've been able to net it out to 8. And so now we've identified 8 skills that are observable by the customer, that they can experience it and they can account for it and score it and report on it and compare it to you versus your competition and give you feedback on that after a deal. Now imagine that rep by rep, you start getting deal by deal feedback on your 8 skills, those skills that move the 53% of losses, of course, account for 100% of the wins. And now you can start to see which of these 8 skills your company, a specific team, or an individual rep need to work on. And what I can tell you is that right now, if I look at this database anonymized and in aggregate, in wins, the number one skill in getting wins over the line that keeps coming back is really 2 things, either providing expert insights or aligning your solution to their problems and needs. Like those 2 things are not going away. They score high in wins. When you lose the 2 things that out of these 8, so if you had to pick 4 out of the 8, your ability to help them justify a decision and your creativity in your negotiations are the lowest scores when you lose. I hope everybody followed that. So what I'm seeing is in wins and losses, there are really 4 skills: being able to deliver unexpected insight, expert insight, and then aligning your solution to their needs, and then providing value to justify a decision, and then being creative in the way you negotiate are in general showing up as the 4 bright light skills of when you win and when you lose. I would love every company to figure out what it is for them. But if you had to push me today, I'd say work on those 4 things. And we can talk about how to do that and how to prioritize that. But the bottom line is being able to just chunk your training into that skill for that person. And in our case, training them on that skill, giving them a tool to perfect that skill, and then putting them through a series of role plays, AI-driven role plays to demonstrate the practice and the proficiency on that is the new motion that we're seeing. But I hope that's helpful for everybody, that I could net it out to those 4 particular skills. The key again being there are 8 that are predictive of wins and losses. The key is that they're observable by buyers, comparable between you and the competition by buyers, and they can score and give you feedback on them. And that's where the power moving forward is going to come from.
That's great. Ariel, care to add before we move to the next one?
I think Tim said it all. I think it's spot on.
That was fantastic. All right, the 4th and last pillar we'll do this and we'll do a wrap up. So if you do have questions, please do add them in. Mark, appreciate you jumping in there also. And this is what I think of as kind of like the if it's an onion and there's layers to the onion, the personalized coaching, I think, is really what will meld it all together going forward in the future. And AI certainly will enhance our ability to do all of that more seamlessly. So kind of the definition of this concept here is, you have the ability to get historical performance. You combine that with a consistent or a structured manager process. Now AI can really, to Tim's point, highlight areas of deficiency. Here's a skill, here's a process that may be missing. It can suggest agendas and questions to talk about. It can suggest opportunities or behaviors that are not happening at the rate or the trend line of what you'd expect. And now you can have a very level set conversation between a manager and a rep, and that coaching can be a lot more holistic. So I'll kick it to Ariel here first because you didn't get to go on the last one. When we think about this personalized coaching, this encompassing process between the manager and the rep, how does AI make the hard conversations or maybe just challenging conversations easier and more, maybe a little bit more eloquent?
Sure, and I think we touched upon it in different parts of the conversation, right, that we had today in terms of just in time, in terms of making it really relevant and grounded within the details and so on and so forth. And I think that, to me, like if you think of the spectrum of one end being the way that we used to train with kind of top-down training once a year in a classroom for like many hours, and then use it when you get to it, right? I think on the far end of that spectrum would be there's an opportunity that you manage as a rep. There's a call that you have in an hour, and this is a call with the CFO, and the AI would tell you, look, Brian, in your last 3 calls with CFOs, you missed that skill, which is really important. Why don't we role play your next call that's happening in an hour based on all of the data that is aggregated in your CRM, based on all of the recordings, everything that we know about this specific opportunity, alongside with the best practices and the methodologies that are deployed in your company to make sure that you're ready to be successful in this call. Then you have an incentive to do that because you do want to be successful in that call.
Sure.
And I think that's, to me, like the level of personalized coaching that we're getting to with AI. And I think that the manager's roles become not to be intimidated by that, but think of the AI as the assistant or the AI assistant of the manager. So the manager can deploy different tools to help them deliver some of that. And those tools can take into account a lot of data and generate an output that is far exceeds what the manager that a limited time can do in the level of personalization and grounding in data.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, care to add?
There's a degree of personalized coaching going at scale that I didn't realize. I'll give you a quick anecdote. I was at a conference recently, and a young man stopped me in the hall and said, I just want you to know you're the editor of all my sales emails. And I'm like, well, how the what? and he said, well, let me explain. And he talked about how, in this case, he uses chat because I've written 3 books and they're all online and they're all in chat. And he challenges prompts chat to build stories and messages using the frameworks that I've taught in these books. And then he goes, now write me a gaining access email based on this against this competitor. And then he goes and then prompts it in the voice of Tim Reister. And he's showing me all this and it pulls up an email. And I'm like, holy crap. I wish I'd have written that email. Like that was really pretty good. And then I thought, wow, he paid me $0 for that, except he pulled out the book and then asked me to autograph it. And I said, geez, I feel like I'm signing my death warrant. Like here it was. So personalized coaching is like you can get personalized coaching by experts. But I digress a little bit, but I thought it was a very interesting story. It brought me face to face with my own singularity in the world of AI. But I think this is what we're talking about, right? Is this can be so specific to a need identified by a rep, by a manager, and by a buyer. And the thing they need to do for like he's like, I'm going head to head against this competition that's installed, and I would like to write a gaining access email based on this methodology, and then I want it edited by the researcher author. Like that's the world that we're moving rapidly to. I just hope like guys who are that good at prompt engineering, don't proliferate too fast so that until I retire at least. But I hope that was helpful, folks. I mean, I'm giving away some secrets here, but that is where it's headed. And it's going to be amazing, scary, but amazing.
What an awesome anecdote. That's also takes a good amount of confidence to come do that and say, you've been writing all my emails. But
Right,
that's
right, right.
fantastic. Yeah.
I've been stealing your IP. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
right. Thanks, OpenAI. No, and I'll add to this also because Ariel, you were making a point that I think is I'll say it a little bit differently, but like the general concept that I think that is going to happen with personalized coaching is that the manager is going to change much more from like this manager who's just having to hold you accountable and get the forecast and take that forecast back to their director, and the forecast rolls all the way up the organization. And we use the word coaching everywhere because we believe that that leader, that manager, is now going to be a really hopefully personalized, customized coach to that rep, because they're going to right now, if I manage 10 people in a sales org and I'm having 10 30 minute to an hour long conversations with those people each day, plus all the other things I'm on, it's hard to keep track of all those tangles and weaves and ups and downs and what's going right, what's going wrong, where they could be better. But the AI is going to be able to do that really well, to your point. And the AI is going to be able to say, here are all these trends. Here's all the conversations we've had in the past just between the manager and the rep. Here's what has been a consistent area of improvement. Here's been a consistent area of challenge. And now it can inform me, the manager coach, hey, when you meet with this person, here are things you may want to touch on. Here are things that have continued to be a problem since last time, or have gotten a lot better and you may want to highlight. And I think it's going to really augment and enhance the people who are great at taking those signals, taking that suggestion, finding action plans from that. It's going to make them awesome. Like if you had a personal trainer who knew exactly what exercises were going to make you better at the thing you wanted or help you get that 6-pack abs, whatever, like they're coming in being like, hey, today we're going to do this. And I'm going to prescribe you these things for the next 5 days. And so I think it's going to be, it has the promise to be just a phenomenal, improvement on that relationship, which if you talk to any organization, what you'll hear is that like coaching is key, but like no one's doing it well and no one's doing it consistently. And we don't know if they're doing it, at a high degree. I want to stop talking for a second. I'm going to give it back to you guys quickly because we have about 2.5 minutes left. But the rapid fire wrap up here, and I'll go Tim and then Ariel. What is the biggest challenge we need to solve for our customer facing teams with AI? That's, not a 2-minute question, but in like a 30-second snippet, how can we try to do that?
The last remaining piece of significant value a seller really provides to this equation is the ability to articulate value or affirm value. And there's a lot of things we could help them get better at, but that the human interaction is going to still be the seller's thing. And that should be the focus on how to really pinpoint the coaching needed in that area.
That's phenomenal. Ariel?
I'd say be more human than the AI. And for that, listen very carefully and be mindful of what you ask. So how do you ask the right questions and what to listen for is, to me, even more important than articulating the right message.
I think, and I would say it is trust. It is how do we go create the most amount of trust between that seller and the customer prospect counterpart. And what's interesting about both you guys, those are extremely, the articulation of value, the be more human. I think ultimately that lends itself to, if I'm coming to solve a problem or solve some pain, do I believe that, can you solve it? Can this product solve it? And ultimately, can that rep solve it? It sounds like to me there's no shortage of enthusiasm if you guys listen to this call between the two of you on the future of AI. Very quickly, I know you guys are experts. You're both experts on sales and the state of sales. Tim, where can people find you to hear more from you?
2 places. So corporatevisions.com, or emblazegrowth.com. Emblaze Growth is a a sales leader community that we're running, and all of our initial research goes there. So if you want to stay on the edge of like the latest research we're doing into the mind of the buyer and how you can affect it, go to emblazegrowth.com.
Awesome. Ariel, where can people find you?
Secondnature.ai. Find me there.
Awesome. And you can find me at ambition.com or on LinkedIn. I really appreciate everyone who joined us both on the webinar here and on LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much. We'll be sending a follow-up with some of this content. And Tim, Ariel, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys joining me. This has been great.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Thanks.